Okay, so now. No, when that says that, then you hit your music. You turn your music on. There we go. So now go live and then do your opening.
Which is not playing.
Oh, you got to turn it up.
Sorry.
There you go. Now hit your go live. There we go.
Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Culturally Damaged, now coming to you live in video on Facebook, as well as our regular programming, which is on Spreaker, iTunes,
and Mixler.
So we want to welcome everybody to the show. This is Dan and Chris, and we are Culturally Damaged. It is the end of 2017, so we are giving you a little Alan Parsons project here. I wouldn't want to be like you. That one I dedicate out to Dan. Today we're going to do a little bit of everything. We're going to do some predictions mostly. We're going to break out the crystal balls for 2018 in the categories of sports and politics and whatever else we want. And if you want to come on and come on to our Facebook page and type in the comments categories something that you think might happen in 2018, we'd like to hear it, whether or not you're serious or not. I really don't care. Just humble us. Make us laugh at least. But how was your Christmas?
Christmas went very well this year. Ended up, although I think the last time we talked about it, I told you I had some issues with this, like when we're celebrating and all that jazz. And
Sure.
I screwed it up. So I was expecting everybody to be celebrating Christmas Eve. And so I started my abouts Christmas Eve, going to people's houses, and I show up, and I find out that they're going to church in 15 minutes.
Oh,
and,
that's embarrassing.
I'm like, well, hey, this will give me some extra time at my next houses.
Yeah, you wrap some more presents, maybe put some more bows on them.
But then I thought, before I show up at the second house, maybe I should text to see if they're doing it today or tomorrow.
Good idea, Dan.
Yeah, well, they were both doing it the next day. And the second remark I got back was, no a-hole. Since we don't have explicit lyrics, we have to be proper here. But no a-hole, we never do it on Christmas Eve.
Oh, wow. That's very Christmassy.
Yeah, so, but all in all, I rebooted. Christmas Day, I went out and went to a couple people's houses, gave some presents, got some presents, and had a good time.
Well, that's good. That's all that matters is holiday cheer for everyone. A-hole. We don't do it on.
And how did your first Christmas in Florida go?
My first Christmas in Florida was very nice. We actually celebrate on Christmas Day, so we do the presents, we do all that stuff. But it was really nice. Having my family here was different and was very nice. And we exchanged a lot of fun gifts and had a good time. And then we made dinner, which was a team effort. We had a pecan pie. It was not a damn pecan pie, but it was this next best thing. And we had ham, and we tried to eat somewhat keto-friendly, which is I'm on the keto diet, but it all fell to the wayside after about halfway through the meal, and I think I stacked up about 4,000 or 5,000 calories. But I'm back on the diet train now, and back to the regular thing. Hopefully, New Year's Eve, I don't booze it up too much, and if I do, it'll be all clear liquors for me, pal.
Well, just remember, 1,600 calories of alcohol is 1,600 calories.
Yes, it is. And it's a $1,600 bail if you drink 1,600 calories of bourbon, which I did last week. And that was interesting.
And before we get going too far, I just wanted to say thank you for bringing in the leftover ham. So I did not have any ham, and I didn't get any leftovers. So ham is my Christmas leftover.
Well, that's very good. That's honey baked ham. There's a plug for honey baked ham in Clearwater. They do a fine job. The folks over there are very nice. We bought a half pound of ham for 3 people, and my mom eats like a bird. My dad eats like a bird too, but it's a vulture. All right. Well, so we have some predictions. This has been a shit stain of a year, 2017, in every way, shape, and form. I'm sure that there are some people out there who may have done well in the stock market or something. But all in all, I have to say that at least for me, this was a worthless year. But 2018 is well on its way. It will be here on Monday, I believe, and it's going to be a new year. And I've got some predictions for the new year, and I think you do too.
Well, I do, and but I just wanted to we finish off this last season with the Bucs, and as you mentioned, the Lightning are playing really well right now. But as you mentioned, this year though, it started off with the Lightning missing the playoffs.
Yes.
This year.
That was this year.
Early this year, and then the Rays. We thought halfway through the season that they were going to make. They looked like they were in the running for the wild card. We thought we had a good chance at the playoffs, and things just fell apart dismally towards the end, and they didn't make it. And now our Bucs, who we thought were going to make the playoffs, obviously are on their way to that 4-12 finish. Oh, and let's not forget the Tampa Bay Storm just closed down operations. So
they did, but more to come on that later in my story. But playoffs, I think, is going to playoffs. Playoffs?
Not for this franchise.
Playoffs is going to be layoffs, I think, here pretty soon, because I think we're going to get rid of some people. I brought my crystal ball. You can't see it in the picture, but I did bring my crystal ball here, and right now I am looking at it, and the first thing that it is telling me is that Dirk Cutter will be fired at season's end.
You are really going out on a line on that one, Mr. Parker.
We're still at the trunk of the tree. We haven't ventured out to limbs yet. But my opinion, the Glazers are going to take a good look, like they said they would, and they've promised him that guarantee that they're going to take a long look at the totality of the circumstances, as we say in the legal field, and they're going to make a decision based on that. But I think what they're going to find is the lack of offensive production. The lack of quarterback development from Jameis, especially with the turnovers, and how Cutter is really his hire was tied to being Jameis's developer, and then the lack of team control. We've had incidences 2 times on the field this year with Jameis where he acted like just a complete fool, and he couldn't be controlled by any of the coaches. A couple from Evans, and then we have this latest issue with Baker in the locker room because Baker jumped off sides on a key play at the very end of the game that probably maybe cost them the game, and he didn't seem to be too upset about it in the locker room. I don't know if you've heard about that.
Yeah, well, I did, and I watched that game. These last 2 games, I've actually recorded and watched the whole game, made sure I didn't fall asleep halfway through like I usually do.
It's a good game.
Yeah, it was a good game, and the most frustrating thing about this, and this is one of the things that concerns me, I really don't like to change coaches. I'm sick and tired of having new coaches. New coaches mean probably a new GM.
It's a rebuild for the most part.
It's a new philosophy, new players, but Dirk Cutter, it's like the little things. We talked about there was the fumbled snap. Like, come on, like these little things. These are the tiny little things that seem to be getting overlooked. The penalties, the offsides,
it's sloppy
the false
football.
start.
It's sloppy, undisciplined football, and I think that is going to play into his firing. And I just think you have to do it. There was so much hope going into the season. We beat a dead horse. We talk about all the hope, and then and a guy like Chris Baker, who's trying to ice the kicker on HBO's Hard Knocks and be a funny guy and seduce trees, but he can't watch the ball and see when to. It just drives me nuts. But it's lack of discipline. Is there any ramifications for these miscues? These guys get paid millions of dollars. No. Not other teams kill themselves like the Bucs do. I don't care what anybody says. I know other teams get penalties, but not quite like the Bucs.
No, I've maybe 3 or 4 games I think the Bucs have lost directly as a result of penalties this year.
Yeah.
And whether it's last drives of the season causing us to kick a field goal and we miss a field goal.
Terrible in the red zone.
All these kind of different things. And a lot of those red zone problems I think are related to penalties.
Absolutely. Linemen jumping off sides, getting behind the chains. It's just not fundamental good football. And I think that's says a lot about Dirk Cutter, and I think that says a lot about his future. It's his first year ever as a head coach in the NFL. Second in the NFL. First time ever being a head coach in the NFL. And he just hadn't gotten it done. So I think his whole regime is gone, and I'm looking into my crystal ball again, and I am seeing that general manager Jason Licht will also be canned.
Or Jason Light.
Licht, Liga, Aga, Uga, not going to work here anymore. He's gone. And who we're going to hire? Well, this crystal ball is saying none other than Hall of Famer Derek Brooks is going to be our new general manager. for the Bucs.
Now, I will say that is going out on the limb. So, what makes you? Do you have any reason to believe, or is this
Maybe.
speculation and supposition here?
I mean, maybe
Purely.
maybe I have people that I know. Maybe I don't. But all I can say is the Storm shut down operations. Derek Brooks, defensive guy, certainly what we need right now on the Bucs team. We have to have a defensive guy. He's a players kind of guy, but he was president of the Storm. Storm shut down operations. He's unemployed. He needs a job. He's a Hall of Famer. He does so much good stuff in the area. Everyone seems to love him. He's a Walter Payton Award finalist one year when he played. He is a Hall of Famer. That doesn't come very easy in Buckland. We only have, 3 or 4 Hall of Famers. But I think I think that he has the business acumen from his time in the Arena Football League, and I think that he knows what the Bucs need because he was around when the Bucs were the most successful. And I think what Brooks is going to do is he's going to ignite this fierce campaign to go out and get my man Gruden. He's going to get some players together.
Wait. So you mean, I think you said head coach, but you mean...
no, not head coach.
General manager?
General manager.
Okay.
Well, Jason Light's going to be fired. He's going to be replaced as general manager by Derek Brooks.
All right. Now I'm starting to buy what you're saying.
Derek Brooks. I'm sorry. Well, I said that Jason Light's going to be replaced by Derek Brooks. And Derek Brooks is going to ignite this huge campaign throughout Bucs Nation to go out and get the old guy back, John Gruden, and bring us back to our glory. And he's going to be equipped with a $55 million contract over the course of 5 years for John Gruden. And Gruden's he's going to be Gruden, and he's going to toy with it. He's going to tease. And he's going to think about it. He's going to entertain offers from other teams. He's going to say kind of no, and then all of a sudden one day, somewhere around the end of February, he's going to take the job. And he's going to come back.
Well, I have heard the reports out there that Gruden has been contacting some old assistants and different things, and so he's trying to bring the crew back together, so to speak. It sounds, in the way they're posing it, is that just in case he gets a job offer, I would not be surprised if there's actually already a deal in place for John, whether it's here or somewhere else. If I'm predicting if he's getting hired, I would say probably within a week after the season being over, he would be hired here.
And that's assuming things are already in motion, which is a possibility. If he is contacting coaches, you can't think that there's a lot of NFL teams out there trying to hire him because he's been out of the game for so long. However, he is a big name, especially around here. He brought the city a Super Bowl. But John brings that fire. He brings that knowledge. He brings that offensive prowess that we need. And I think one of the things he's going to do, and we talk about going out on limbs, here's my next prediction. Defensive coordinator brought in with John Gruden, Jeff Fisher. Jeff Fisher's going to take the job as defensive coordinator under John Gruden. And he's going to lead this defense back to glory.
It is all of his players out in L.A. that are playing for the Rams. So
he said that, and not a class move. Not a class move. Probably, maybe it helped his marketability a little bit, but it showed like a little bit of grudge that I think he's still holding against the people out there. But speaking of the Rams, one of the first moves that Brooks is going to deal out in his tenure as general manager, this is according to my crystal ball and nothing else, is he's going to deal out Deshaun Jackson. He's going to put him back out in California to the LA Rams. And in addition for that, we're going to get Tavon Austin and a couple of draft picks. So we're still going to have that speed, younger speed, on the corner that we're going to get out of an underachieving wide receiver out of West Virginia who played now, who had a unreal 40 time at the combine. Fast guy, but very small and hard to get the ball to for the most part. He's not a leaper.
Well, I have to say that's the if John's here, I don't know the likelihood that Fisher is going to want to get back into being a defensive coordinator. It sounds kind of like he's putting his eyes on another head coaching job. But it can't be such a bad thing to kind of bring in some heavy hitters and to really get this defense. Even if we use Jeff Fisher for his his player personnel input on a defensive side. And LA did have the good one of the best defenses I think in the last few years before he was fired.
He's a great defensive mind, and I really don't think because of his age and his record as a head coach that he's going to get to the point where he can get a head coaching job this year. But if he coaches under Gruden for a year and the Bucs have a little bit of success, he's definitely the first name out there to go out for a head coaching job. So once 1 year, you come in, you make a couple of $1 million, and then you go out and you take a job as a head coaching job next year. But I think that would be an ideal situation. But that's what my crystal ball is telling me. And Tavon Austin in for Deshaun Jackson. Deshaun Jackson, who having some legal troubles lately. Deshaun, if you're listening, you can hire me. I am a criminal defense attorney. I do not work for free, but I would be happy to give you a free consultation at least in your issues you're having now. It seems that a car that is titled to Deshaun Jackson was found at the International Mall with bullet holes in it containing drugs and guns. Am I right?
Yes. Well, no, bullets. I think it was bullets and some weed. So no actual gun, but a bullet.
Okay, so no holes in. I thought I read that there are holes in the car or something.
I don't know. The report that I heard had bullets and weed.
Regardless, not a good thing for Deshaun.
The old ganja.
Not a good thing for a guy who is oftentimes accused of being a gangbanger from out in Los Angeles, California.
Not this show.
Always denied that. I've never accused him of anything other than just being underperforming since he's been here. But this does not help. He says that it was a friend who let him borrow the car, which at the very least shows bad judgment of friends. That paired with his lack of development and not development, but just lack of performance this year. And you could blame Jameis. You could say Jameis didn't get him the ball, but this has probably been his worst year in the NFL. And for what we're paying him, we're just not getting that back.
No, and we discussed last time, I think he may be actually causing more harm than good to this offense.
And explain that to our viewers or our listeners, because that was a pretty good point that I'd really never thought of.
Yeah, just that Jameis, there's so many offensive weapons on this team, and he's the only one that is the true veteran on this, where he was a number one receiver. He expects to be treated as a number one receiver, and being treated as such means getting him the ball. So there's only one ball on this team. Our offense is predicated from running the ball at least half the time. I mean, if you don't have a good 50-50 split, play action isn't going to work. So half the snaps are going to be runs. The other half have to be divided among 6, 7, 8 receivers. And, I think Jameis has focused a little too much on trying to get him the ball, or maybe Dirk Cutter has even focused on trying to get him the ball, and we've lost sight of Mike Evans and some of these other guys who in these last couple games have made some really big catches and caught the ball. So that's
Yeah, and sometimes that's the problem with the NFL. Your front office goes out and tries to get these big name players to put butts in the seats and to stretch the field. In this case, for the Bucs, which they put pressure on the coach to try to utilize that, and it takes them out of their game plan a little bit. And Jameis is not necessarily known for throwing a deep ball. He does throw a nice deep ball, but he hasn't been able to sync up the timing right with Deshaun Jackson. With some time, maybe that could happen, but I see this kind of imploding before it gets to that point. And when the team's offensive game planning strategy is starting to change because you're trying to please other people and you're not trying to just produce yards and points, I think you got a problem. And I agree with your point there.
And the other thing too is that I think the Bucs have a pretty deep receiving core. So when you add in Humphreys, who played well, Bobo Wilson played well, Freddie Martino,
Wilson.
All played very well in Deshaun Jackson's absence. And so I think, going forward, like you said, with that large cap hit or large contract that he has next year, that money is better well spent, perhaps on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, and also if you bring in a guy, if you need the speed, which you do, because we are pretty deep, but we really don't have much speed. Godwin, who you mentioned, is not fast. We got rid of Reedy. We have Humphreys, not a fast guy, he's a slot guy. Marino, these are not guys that are going to scare defenses. You're not going to get safety coverage over these guys because they're so fast and you don't have to game plan around anybody except for Mike Evans. You do have to game plan around Deshaun Jackson, but it's getting so that teams don't really have to. But if you bring in a guy like Tavon Austin, he's not the household name. as Deshaun Jackson, but he is the same build. He comes from the same mold. He's fast, and he hasn't quite hit his stride in NFL yet. I think he could do so. If you bring in a guy like that, you could probably get him for pretty cheap. And I think the Rams are really willing to do that now because they haven't had much success with him. But my crystal ball is telling me something else, and I'm not going to go out on a limb on this one either. You're probably going to make fun of me, but I believe, and the crystal ball is telling me so, that
OBS
that Doug Martin will be let go by the Bucs despite his big contract.
Well, actually, I think Doug. I don't think he has a contract.
Well, he may
through
not.
The end of the year. Through the end of the year, though. I think his contract ends.
I think he has one more year. I think he has one more year left on it, but I think they may be able to get out of it because of the substance abuse. I think part of the contract said that if there's any substance abuse, it would null and void the contract in some way, shape, or form.
I thought this was his last year, but maybe not.
You may be right. If it is,
I thought this was the year that they could have avoided on that contract. So anyway, just so you guys know, this is our first time using our Facebook Live here. So if you catch us on a little break or something, we're trying to see how this goes here. So anyway, but right here.
Unhide.
Click the little eye. Click the little eye.
On KD Main?
Above the KD Main.
This one?
The one above it. Boom.
Oh, Dan, you're trying to get a shameless plug.
That's all we have to do.
You put our show in jeopardy over this.
Well, someone's got to pay the bills here.
All right.
So,
what about this one? Oh, there's a better one there.
Hey, wait.
No, wait. You can't see that.
So, anyway, but Doug Martin. Yeah, I don't. Doug, he's played his last game here, or actually, I think he might even play. But again, bringing up Doug Martin, that's one of the reasons why, Dirk Cutter this last week, Doug was suspended for a game. He was held out last week. Peyton Barber started the game, played very well, and he decides to put Doug Martin back in the game, and Doug didn't do anything. And so you kind of go away from your hot hand of Peyton Barber. So again, Doug, he's had 2 good seasons, I think, out of 5. Injured quite a bit,
but 2 Pro Bowl seasons. Yeah. I mean, they were very good seasons, but you just can't see any light at the end of the tunnel with Doug Martin in Tampa. Maybe he'll go somewhere else and have a lot of success. Seems like a good guy, but I mean, do we know what the suspension was in the last suspension?
They said it was the report was he missed a meeting or he was late for a meeting or something.
Yeah, just so unprofessional. I mean, we have to say that he's unprofessional. He doesn't seem like it.
And this is a second chance, so
it is a second chance.
When you've gotten a second chance. Any little violation is a big deal, especially this season. This is not like it's something that happened 2 or 3 years from his previous suspension.
Right. It was just last year, right? Or same season, yeah. Last year they spent him for this year, yeah. So yeah, he was on thin ice anyway. He's got to go, and with all the teams on this, with all the holes in this team, you got to think now that we just have to depend on Peyton Barber, Jacquizz Rodgers, and Charles Sims to kind of carry the load. I don't see us bringing in anybody because it's not really that big of a hole. We have a running back by committee, pretty strong committee for the most part. Charles Sims pretty good out of the backfield catching the ball, and the other 2, Peyton Barber, more of a power rusher that doesn't make many moves but is strong, has that one step and he's gone. Jacquizz Rodgers a little more shifty. You got to like that committee. I think Fitzpatrick is out. That's my prediction. Fitzpatrick, Fitz retires.
You think he retires, huh?
I think he retires. He realizes this year that he's going to end on a decent note. He came in and won a couple of games for the Bucs. Mm-hmm. I don't think he necessarily won them. He was a starting quarterback that won them. It's like saying Brad Johnson won the Super Bowl for us.
Hey, he beat the Jets.
He did beat the Jets. His team beat the Jets.
And who? It was another terrible team, but didn't lose them at least.
I think the Bucs go out in free agency and they get Chad Henne to come in and be the backup quarterback this coming year. To have a good, solid veteran backup who's been a starter in the NFL, but didn't produce the interceptions that Fitzpatrick had when he was with the Jets, and can do a little bit more under center when you want him to on 3rd and long than Fitzpatrick's could do.
Well, it's one of those things. It's so hard. If the current coaching regime was still going to be there, and Jason Light, I would probably say Fitzpatrick would be a shoo-in to stay, because it's one of those. It's a backup quarterback. If you have somebody who knows the system a little bit better, I would probably prefer to keep the person in place. And again, God help us, he's not really supposed to play that much. If the backup quarterback is playing more than 2 or 3 games, your season is probably not going to end well for most teams. So
no, I mean you have to have a solid backup,
yeah.
man. No matter what level you're on. I don't know if you watched West Virginia play yesterday, but they were playing Utah, and their starting quarterback was out. They had a couple other players out too, but their backup quarterback was so bad that they just got completely annihilated by Utah. And that's an embarrassing thing to see on national TV if you're a West Virginia fan. A very enjoyable thing for me to see as a Marshall fan. But you'd like to think that they have a better backup that could come in and do a little bit more damage. And I think that with the Bucs and Fitzpatrick, it's not going to get better. The guy's his arthritis is starting to set in. Retirement homes are calling him already, trying to recruit him as their football quarterback. I don't think it's going to happen. Chad Henne is on the blocks. There's a couple other quarterbacks on the blocks too. But I think he would be a good choice to come in and carry some light work. Chris Baker, 2018, will be let go.
Boom. He
You're
should
out
be
of
let
here.
go right now, probably.
You're out of here, Albert Hainsworth the second. I think despite his $8 million left on his contract, I think they're going to get him out of here, some way, shape, or form. On defense, my crystal ball for 2018 for the Bucs is telling me that Brent Grimes will leave. Brent Grimes is gone.
Yeah.
His wife Miko is going to want to live out in some drier air and where her political views are a little bit more acceptable. So she's going to pull the trigger and pull her husband Brent out of Tampa Bay and out west somewhere where they can enjoy their last days of football.
No, unfortunately, I think the Bucs are going to lose their best cornerback. He came to Tampa Bay thinking that Tampa we were on our way to playoffs and potentially a Super Bowl within another season or two.
Playoffs?
Yep. And that is obviously not in the cards for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers for right now. So if he has another season or two left in him, I think he's going to go elsewhere. I wouldn't be surprised if we see him in a Patriots jersey next year.
Yeah, and as a Pro Bowler, and a Super Bowl champion.
Yeah.
I don't know how well though that Belichick will handle his wife, Miko.
That's true.
Miko could split up the entire organization like Yoko. She could be Yoko did to the Beatles. She could do that to the Patriots. Let's wait and see on that with them. I would love to see that. That would be great. All right, I think my crystal ball is telling me that even though we're going to lose some cornerbacks, we're going to get some. Lions cornerback DJ Hayden will be a free agent after this year. I think the Bucs are going to sign him to a 3-year deal. How's that for going out on a limb?
If he's a free, I don't know. I would be hard pressed to see the Buccaneers sign any major free agents without severely overpaying. Unfortunately, I think this is going to now. Look, a lot of it can depend on who we do get in as head coach, but I think this may end up being one of those years where we got Vincent Jackson, the offensive linemen, and everybody, where we had to really overpay over what most other teams might be willing to pay.
I mean, you're saying that DJ Hayden is a high.
Oh, I don't know. Unfortunately, I don't know that much about it.
No, he's not. I mean, he's a starter for Detroit. He's proven himself. He's probably on his way up, but I think he would be a guy to get now. I think Vernon Hargreaves. I think we're going to have to. There's two things with Vernon Hargreaves. Do you put him over at the slot position and basically have him do not what you drafted him to do in the first round, but move him over to carry the slot position? Or do you go out and you try to get a veteran like Grimes to take his place, somebody like Pac-Man Jones from Cincinnati who could come in, who has some legal problems, who's had some issues. However, he could be a good punt returner and a good cover corner.
I got an idea. Darrelle Revis.
No, yeah. I think we went down that road once. That didn't work.
Yeah, actually,
and I don't think he's very good now.
No, I don't think. Actually, I think he had a good game the other day, but what I would like to see, and again, a lot of this is going to be dependent on who. I think we can all, whether Dirk Cutter, I think it's unlikely he returns, but in the unlikelihood that he does return, I think it's clear that Mike Smith is not going to be the defensive coordinator next year. So
no.
At the very least, we're going to have a new. So whoever that new defensive coordinator is, I think I would really like to see Hargreaves pushed into the position of the number one, but also to play a lot more aggressive. I think if he plays aggressive, if he gets closer to the line of scrimmage, he can't be off 10 yards, of any receiver in the NFL. You're going to get burned. And so I'd like to see him play more aggressive and essentially make it or break. Look, are you going to be a cornerback? 2 years is plenty of time to get yourself acquainted with the NFL game, to learn from other players. He's had 2 years with Grimes. My only concern, of course, is that Vernon he missed almost half the season, so he's really going to be set back. The good thing is that if the Bucs get a new head coach, I believe we get a little extra time in training camp. I think there might be a few extra weeks that the new coaching staff might get with the players. So,
well, unfortunately, I think the Mike Smith's going to have to go. I like Mike Smith. I think it's been a bad year for him. He had a good year last year, and I think he's an excellent coach. We talked about this on the show before, the amazing things he did in Jacksonville and even in Atlanta when he was there. But I think, the new coach is going to want to bring in his new guy. I'm not so sure Monty Kiffin's going to come back here, but I do think that there's another Kiffin in the state of Florida that he may be interested in. Who knows? But, you have a lot of you have a lot of people out there that we passed up on to get Vernon Hargreaves, and some of those guys are doing really well. And I just don't I'm not sure that we can continue to invest in him. We have the worst pass defense in the league, despite having Chris Grimes, and so that points directly to your safeties and your other corners. So
it does, but to me, I think our biggest problem is on that line, and you and I talk about it all the time, and I still think if we have some good pass rushers, that the secondary will kind of clear itself up. It'll make Vernon Hargreaves a lot better or look like a lot better cornerback.
Absolutely, yeah.
Rush.
Well, yeah, so, if you're going to give the quarterback 5 seconds to throw the ball, somebody's going to get open, and it's usually his guy. So, not very good safety help either. So we're hoping T.J. Ward can come back and be healthy next year and play, and hopefully we get a coach who will realize that T.J. Ward is the guy that we need back there at safety. But your mention of pass rush brings me to my next point, and my crystal ball is now telling me that with the 5th pick in the 2018 NFL Draft, the Bucs will select pass rusher Bradley Chubb of North Carolina State. This guy is a nonstop motor that will wreak havoc on quarterbacks. I've watched him play several times this year. He has a wingspan of about 7 feet, and the guy is all over the field. I once saw him this year knock the ball out of a running back going around the end. He knocks the ball from the opposite side of him, reaches around, knocks the ball out. It hits his knee, goes 20 yards downfield. There's a scrum for the ball, and at the bottom of the pile, who is it? None other than Bradley Chubb. This guy can play football, man. I'm telling you, he is a mean SOB who's going to get after the quarterback, and teams are going to they're going to have to double him, or they're going to have to get somebody really good on the quarterback's backside to block him. And I think this is going to make everybody on that defensive line a lot better, like Gerald McCoy.
Well, I certainly I've heard lots of good things about Mr. Chubb. He's not
That's
the only.
what she said.
He's not the only Chubb in NCAA football right now, but
sure.
I've heard good things. I think it'd be a great pick. Hopefully we use our 2nd and 3rd round picks, maybe to also pick up defensive linemen and pass rushers. So I wouldn't, this offseason, I honestly I'd like to see 2 or 3, maybe even 4 players brought in, whether it's free agency, draft, even if there's some later round that are to be backups. But we really need to bring in a lot of defensive line.
Yeah, we need depth on the line.
Baker's gone.
I certainly hope so.
Spence, he's going to be back, but we can't count on him.
He gets hurt a lot.
So,
he's injured a lot, but I think, gosh, the guy had such talent. If we can get him on one edge, Brad Chubb on the other end, and then we get somebody to complement Gerald McCoy that's not Chris Baker, somebody big, some big run stopper who can just hog up, jam up holes. I think you have a pretty good fix there, but that's a big leap of faith.
And I will say, I give people a hard time about Gerald, and a lot of other fans give a lot harder time to Gerald. But he was playing with a partially torn bicep, and he had a pretty good game. And I think he shows, he's been able to show, why he is a Pro Bowler and why. But if he doesn't get any help, that defensive line isn't going to go anywhere.
Another year, another Pro Bowl, despite his injuries and despite the woes that the Bucs had on defense. Just a couple of other predictions before we take a short break here. I predict the Bucs are going to go 9-7 next year, which is I think I predicted this year, but they're going to just miss a wild card spot. But hope's going to be high this time next year going into 2019, and we're going to have a new coach, and we're going to have a happier fan base.
I am optimistic about next year. If anything, these last two games with Atlanta and Carolina have showed that the Bucs can compete. We're not that far away. They're not that far away from competing and winning these games. Carolina came in, or we went to Carolina. It was an away game at Carolina. Carolina had to win that game to make the playoffs. And the Bucs had nothing to play for.
Nothing to win or to lose, really.
A lot of injuries, a lot more injuries happened during the game, and we almost won that game.
Yeah.
If not for that penalty at the end, there's a good chance the Buccaneers, escape with the victory. So, 9-7. I'm not gonna, this year I wanted to be a little bit more optimistic, but considering we're going to be 4-12, I don't think I think it would be a little irresponsible to predict that they would be much better than 9-7. So you're really just blowing it out your butt if you're saying much better than that.
No, I just think it's impossible. And plus, you got to calculate the schedule they played in this year was very difficult, and injuries we had. Not to make excuse for the Bucs, but everything went wrong for the Bucs this year.
If we could play the Browns like 10 times,
why can't we play the Browns more?
Let's get transferred to that division.
Well, I'll put a letter in. I'll put a letter in and see if that can help.
Or get the Browns moved. Actually, I don't want to play Pittsburgh and Baltimore.
Can we play in an AFC South division where the Jaguars are just cleaning house?
We got to play against the Texans every year. And
you get to play
every year.
You got to play the Titans, and then Luck's going to be hurt again for the next 3 years. Pagano's probably still going to be there. Man, if my dad's listening, he's probably going to shoot me out because he's a big Colts fan.
The one thing that scares me as far as Gruden might be concerned would be Arizona's situation. There's been some reports that Bruce Arians is going to retire at the end of the year, or maybe mutually, if Carson Palmer is still going to be Arizona's quarterback for another couple years, that might be one of those. I'm not saying it's pop, but Gruden has always been in love with veteran quarterbacks and everything. And
that's a good point. That's a good point. But he also loves Jameis.
Yeah, he does.
I think it's fair to say he does.
I mean, it'll be his fourth season.
Fourth season. Fourth, yeah.
So
I think
that's not that's a significant amount of time in the league. You should be past most.
I think he's at his prime, and I think he knows that there's just a couple of little things that he needs to fix, and I think he thinks he can fix them. And if he's got that quarterback, he hates quarterbacks turning the ball over more than anybody. I mean, that's why he wants veteran quarterbacks. And that's why he always had him. So you got to think he's going to fix that quick. I mean, not that it's just an easy fix to make a guy quit taking so many risks, but a lot of his fumbles, they don't come from taking risks. They come from just not taking care of the ball in the pocket. And that's the sad thing. And then he goes crazy last week after he thought he recovered the ball instead of Julius Peppers, and that was just embarrassing. That can't happen. Somebody told me this week that he was hangry because he's so hungry for a W. He hadn't eaten his fingers. He hadn't been able to eat a W in a while, so he's hangry. But
I'm getting hangry.
You're getting hangry too. But hey, I know you're getting hangry for my last 3 picks. My last 3 picks for Christiadamus. That's my new name. I'm calling myself Christiadamus. Play this back in a year from now, and you're going to say, "Wow, how do you know all that stuff?" Last 3 honorable mention picks that I have here. The Vikings are going to become the first home team to play in the Super Bowl this year, and they're going to lose in a close game to the Steelers. And it's going to be Ben Roethlisberger's last game. He's going to retire. He's going to ride into the sunset at the end of the game. That's going to be the end of Ben Roethlisberger. Then we get to see what the Steelers are going to do post Ben Roethlisberger, which should be fun.
You certainly are endearing yourself to the Steeler fans locally, so I kind of despise those folks. But
I'm just telling you what's in the crystal ball, man.
They're going to have to do a lot better against the Patriots than they've done in the past to make your
Well, I think this might be the year. I say it every year,
come true.
But I think this might be the year. I think they beat the Patriots. But what's funny though is James Harrison is now a Patriot, and he took his playbook with him. Surely
not so funny to other people.
Oh man, that is something. He's been a Steeler for life. But actually, he did go to the Bengals for a while, which was also a conference rival. People didn't like that, but they were like, he's not starting. He's got to do what he's got to do. But now to go to the Patriots this late in the season, woo, I don't know. Rockets take the NBA title this year in 7 games over the Celtics. 7 games over the Celtics in the finals. Mike D'Antoni wins Coach of the Year again. And the Yankees recapture their old glory by winning their 28th World Series. I knew you'd love that one. That's the one we're going to Finish on because Dan's over here hemming and hawing. He hates the Yankees, as do most people here in the area because you're either a Tampa Bay fan or a Boston fan. But we have something special for you right now. During the break, Dan, who is on a huge roll right now, last week interviewed John Gruden.
Yeah.
And Gruden was very, very humble.
Very humble. Didn't give us a whole lot of information, but he was very humble.
Yeah, but, he talked to you, and we're not a huge
like you,
show. He didn't, but there's a history. Mm-hmm. And I'll explain that later. Not today, but later, sometime later in our programming.
Another episode.
I'll explain the tiff that John and I have that's just really silly.
Well, let me tell you, it's starting to be a common thread here. Evan wouldn't be interviewed by you either.
Is that a fact?
That's a fact.
All right, well, let's go to the interview now and hear what Longo has to say to Dan in our weekly interview, Man to Man with Dan.
Your music off.
Hi, good afternoon, Evan. This is Dan Perry of Culturally Damaged. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Good to see you.
What did you think when you saw you were going to be interviewed by Culturally Damaged today?
It was, I guess, a tough pill to swallow in the beginning.
Ouch. I'm sure most of that's directed at my co-host. Anyways, thank you again for joining us. Let's get started. I know you've been traded to the San Francisco Giants, but I was just wondering, the Rays had such a good start last season. What happened down the stretch?
Just us playing terrible.
I'd have to agree with you on that. That's probably one of the reasons why you got traded. Moving right along, September 28, 2011, Game 162. One of the most memorable moments in Tampa Bay Rays history. Evan, take us through and tell us a little bit about what you remember about that moment.
I was standing on deck, and I knew that they had tied the game when I was in the dugout getting ready to hit, and I knew that I was gonna, if they ended up eventually winning the game, that I was gonna have a chance at some point to win the game for us. And so, standing on deck, it was just, I guess, coincidence and fate that they had actually just won the game while I was walking to the plate, and thought I knew I was gonna have a chance to do something special. I would have never dreamed that it would have been a home run, but at least I was in the situation to be able to have a chance at it. And obviously, ball goes over the fence, and I couldn't believe what happened. But when I hit it, I didn't really think it was going to go out. I was actually running hard and kind of trying to peek and see where it ended up. I was thinking, if the ball doesn't get out of the ballpark, I got to make sure I'm on second base. So, I see it duck over the fence, and it was just, pure rejoice after that.
I remember that night very well. My friend Barbie and I lost our voices cheering from left field. That's a night we will not soon forget. Evan, I know this sounds a little weird, but Chris and I were arguing in the office the other day about what type of bathing suits are appropriate to wear here at Clearwater Beach. I keep saying board shorts, but Chris refuses to wear anything but Speedos. What do you think about that?
Probably 4 years ago now, and everybody was wearing Speedos, so I wear Speedos.
So just like our last guest, John Gruden, you refused to be interviewed by my co-host, Chris Parker. You care to explain that?
I see a lot of guys who have a lot of physical ability but don't have enough up top to, be able to control certain situations.
I'm a little scared to ask the follow-up question, but on that note, what in your life reminds you of Chris?
Molly, who is our small wiener dog.
Well, I was not expecting that. Anyway, since you brought up Molly, tell us about Pet Pal and why you and your wife Jamie support them.
Jamie and I chose Pet Pal because they're a local, because they're nonprofit and no kill, and they do great work. They're great people there. Like I said, we've adopted from there, and we've done. Jamie's done plenty of events with them, and we really enjoy working with them.
Well, Evan, that's all the time we have today. Thank you for joining us. Our listeners really appreciate it, and we wish you all the well in San Francisco, and we hope to have you on again someday.
All right, man. Thanks for having me on.
All right, Dan, that was that was embarrassing. That's 2 stars in a week that you have shamed me with.
Hey, look,
what am I going to say?
I just ask the questions and they answer them. Well, I don't know.
All right. Yep, that's true. Well, it was a good interview. I hate to see Longo go. So Longo. Get it? But very well done. I remember a lot of those moments he was talking about. Those are the glory days that we'll be telling our grandkids about. And then we'll probably blame a goat because we haven't been in the World Series in a long time.
Well, I will tell you that game 162. I was at that game. We were down by 7 runs or something, and we hadn't scored freaking 7 runs in a week, and we were going against New York Yankees, who of course had Mariano Soriano, Sandman coming out of the bullpen.
Yeah.
And thank God the Yankees had already wrapped up the AL East and their playoffs and all that kind of jazz. They just kept throwing out meatballer after meatballer, and the Rays kept scoring runs. And I tell you, it was one of the most exciting events that probably the most exciting event that I've ever attended sports-wise in my lifetime.
I would say it's probably up there with the top 3 in the area ever. It was an amazing night. I mean, I was, I believe, up in Eastlake at the Varsity Club, and we had trivia there that night, and it came on the TV, and we said, let's stick around here after the trivia is over and see how this ends, because this is getting interesting. And then everything just happened.
Yeah.
It was amazing. And then we had the series with the Rangers, I believe, which was a complete letdown. But speaking of letdowns, we have some predictions for 2018, not involving sports, but involving everything else. What are your big predictions for 2018 as far as politics in the world goes?
Well, as far as politics go, I will have to say that I don't think there's some people out there that feel that this Alabama election is a sign of things to come for the 2018 elections.
You gonna poo on that?
I am gonna poo a very large poo on that one. I'm not going to necessarily say that things may not turn out well for the Republicans in 2018, but I don't necessarily think that vote is a very good predictor of or litmus of what's going to happen. I will say though that there is a lot of frustration with the president out there, but right now the economy is doing pretty well, and I think the reality of previous elections are usually that if people feel comfortable in the pocketbook, they tend to keep incumbents in the seat as opposed to economic downturns, and regardless of who is the cause of it, or the ups or the downs and all that kind of stuff. And so I would say that the Republicans are probably they're going to hold, outside of a Trump impeachment, I think that the Republicans will probably hold on to the House and Senate in the midterm elections coming up here.
Quote Dan right now on that one. I'm writing this down, and I'm having you sign it, that the Republicans hold on to both houses of Congress, and Trump has 2 more years with, saying he doesn't get impeached, assuming he doesn't get impeached.
Yeah, I don't think that's
he'll have 2 more years with the Republican Congress to do or undo things. But you say the economy is going well right now, but the economy has been on an uptick for several years. It hasn't been. So basically what you're saying is he hasn't done anything bad enough to cause the economy to collapse in 1 year. Okay, I'll give you that. But his new tax plan,
sure that's what I'm saying.
But his new tax plan that he just passed is going to say a lot. I think that's going to be the tell, because in the next year or so, I think we're going to see, the next year and a half, we're really going to see, I don't know exactly what we're going to see, but we're at least going to see results of what that tax plan does. And from past indicators, which usually are the best indicators of future things, we see that trickle-down economics has never really worked. So when George H.W. Bush inherited a bad economy from Reagan, it was tough for him, and I do agree with you that it is the economy. And when it comes to voting, it's just like they say, it's the economy, stupid. So I think that's what people are going to come down to vote for, and whether or not that they're able to get what they were promised and what they thought out of Mr. Trump. But as far as this goes in the future, in 2018, my crystal ball is telling me that Bob Mueller is going to move closer and closer and closer to the president with his investigation.
You guys are on a first-name basis, huh?
Bob Mueller. Yes, I call him Mueller. Mueller.
Hey, Bob.
Mueller. It's Mueller time, baby. But right before the indictment's handed down, Trump will make an attempt to fire Mueller. But it's only going to trigger a massive public response, what we talked about last week, and it's going to be too late. Trump will discredit the investigation, but well into his impeachment proceedings, he is going to resign. He's going to resign office, but not before urging his supporters to rise up against a corrupt government, in which he's going to call it, but not in those eloquent words, but in some crazy tweet. And it's going to be chaos in 2018, even so more than 2017. This country is going to experience a shit show like it has never seen before, and it might be fun to watch, but it's not going to be pretty.
And so, what do you think is going to happen in these elections coming up?
I don't necessarily think that the election in Alabama alone is a pure indicator. I do agree with you there. I mean, you have a pedophile, potentially accused pedophile, with a lot of accusers out there, who loses. Now, it does show that the Democrats were able to mobilize the black vote against both Trump and Roy Moore, and that is a good indicator. And one of the people out there who was actually mobilizing that vote, DeWanna Thompson, is somebody that I used to work with in the Obama campaign, who is a very skillful political operative out in Birmingham, Alabama. And so I think what they were able to do out there with her leadership and the rest of the Democrats was very, very impressive. However, I think the Virginia elections are more of an indicator, and the New Jersey election was more of an indicator of what's going to happen. I think people are upset. People are going to be mobilized, but it does matter who's running. It's not enough to hate someone. You have to have an admiration for someone to really mobilize voters. There was a big disconnect and hatred even with the Democrats in 2004 with George W. Bush. However, they didn't mobilize enough because they didn't admire John Kerry.
Yeah.
And I think that's the same kind of problem that they're going to have. But man, Trump is much more alienating, and I think he's pushed times five.
The thing is that it's Hillary to Republicans, they had that, we talked about
Same
that,
thing,
that
yeah.
vitriol,
Mm-hmm.
that hatred, and a lot of people voted for Trump out of that hatred of Hillary, and by God, we're not going to have Hillary in office. And I would say though that Trump, what Trump has been able to do or has done, he's polarized. So there's a lot of people who dislike him, but his supporters are so his diehard supporters are so fanatical about him. And
So are his diehard reporters over at Fox News.
Yeah, and but he's able to mobilize by just and turn this, whether you agree or disagree, he's able to turn what these other news stations say and all this kind of stuff, and people buy it. And so his supporters, I think are going to come out, to vote. It'll, like you said, it's going to be a lot of it is going to be can Democrats keep the momentum of the what's happened over this last year, the different things, can they keep that going and actually get people to the polls?
But you have to think. I mean, there were people that said when Trump was elected, he's got to stop tweeting. He's president now. He doesn't have to act like this anymore. But it's not. It wasn't necessarily a strategy as much as it was a character flaw. And so he's not going to stop tweeting. He's not going to stop being controversial. He's not going to stop being Donald Trump. So he's going to continue to do these things that are just going to infuriate the other side, because that's what he does. He antagonizes people. He insults people, and that's how he operates. And it has worked because he's said those cue things, those cue words that just touch to the bone of the anger of a lot of his supporters.
Fake news.
And the fake news, and all the stuff he said about kind of scapegoating immigrants for all the problems that we have in the United States. And listen, people hate the government. People hate politics. And one of the things we were talking about the other day is it's the same on both sides. Both sides hate what's going on in Washington, whether it's the Democrats or the Republicans. We just hate the system. We think it's so rigged. It's so problematic in terms of the money that goes into it and what people get back for their money, and the fact that I can't buy a lobbyist, and the fact that corporations can put as much money into an election as they possibly want because they have, for some reason, First Amendment rights as a corporation. But the difference is that, at least in my feeling, is that right now it is getting worse. Some of the decisions that are being made are making it even easier for the rich to be able to manipulate the government and the way the government works. And that's a difference of opinion that you and I probably have, but that's just the way that many of us see
I
it.
don't know that I disagree with about as far as the rich manipulating government. However, I kind of see that didn't start with Trump.
Certainly not.
And it's been going on for
Certainly not.
the rich. Unfortunately, the reality is throughout history, they've controlled things. Whoever holds the money is who's truly in charge. Whether it was, whether it's in the show Game of Thrones, and you have the whatever bank that controls who's going to be the king and who's going to do this and that. The same thing happens here with our politicians, both Democrats and Republicans. The big spenders, those are going to be the people that are going to dictate. Unfortunately, there's Sanders and there's a few other people there that aren't necessarily beholden, but the vast majority of political or politicians are beholden to large donors.
On both sides. On both sides. And I think the special interests, whether it be corporations or whether it be unions or whether it be trial lawyers, God forbid, there is lobbies. If there's money talks, BS walks, and that's how it's worked. But we can put in guidelines and laws to restrict this, and we don't. And in fact, when we start to try to do that, these corporations get so tied up into getting rid of these politicians and what they call primarying them, just like the NRA does. They use their political power and the power of their pocketbooks to squash out anything even before it starts. For example, when we had just recently this Las Vegas shooting, we all finally agreed that I believe they're called pump stocks. Is that what they're called?
Bump stocks.
Bump stocks. Bump stocks. So this is actually a piece of the gun that turns it into an automatic weapon without actually buying an automatic weapon. So you're making a gun into an automatic weapon. So you found a loophole to have an automatic weapon that you're not supposed to have. So we said, well, let's all agree that we should outlaw bump stocks on guns. And even the NRA agreed, last I heard. Even the NRA agreed that they were going to give, and they haven't given anything in years, even though that back in the 1990s, they were all for background checks on everybody. They've changed their position on that. So they've taken the position that if you give anything, you're giving everything. But they actually agreed.
See, they can compromise.
Yeah, but what happened? It's been killed. There's nothing. We haven't heard anything else about it, and the legislation never happened. Things that we all agree on, we can't even get passed in Washington.
Well, they've had some other big issues that they've been dealing with, so.
Well, I think the problem with guns is a pretty big issue, and I think if they can't chew bubble gum and walk at the same time, they don't deserve to be in Washington.
It is Congress.
Yeah, it is, and they have a lower approval rating than gonorrhea, and I think that's actually a true statement. And you know what? When I hear that, and I hear that they have a 8 or 9% approval rating, and gonorrhea has like a 10% approval rating. You know what the first thing that comes to my mind is?
I'm scared.
Who are these 90% people that think Congress is doing a good job? But you're trapped. You get up there, you get tainted, and you can't work within a system that these old boys that have been there for 30, 40 years, some of them 50, 60 years. Robert C. Byrd, I think, was there for 50-some years, my old senator from the state of West Virginia. And they get everything they want because they have seniority, and it's all based on seniority. And it's all based on them being able to stay there long enough, to be powerful enough, to make themselves powerful enough to pass the laws that they want, and to stay there longer and longer and longer.
Well, and that's what I think. A lot of politicians they pay lip service to election reform and all this other stuff, but I think when it comes down to it, the people in office, their primary goal is to stay in office. And so, if having big money, the people who are generally speaking, now there's always, like you said, primarying where people switch their money to, but the vast majority of money is used to for the incumbents. And so incumbents are, generally speaking, going to have a lot more money than their challengers. And so there's really, like I said, there's a want to upset this apple cart and change things. But I think the reality of the situation is, for politicians, it's more important that they stay in their position than that they change things. And because essentially, if you take money out of it, or if you limit the contributions, it makes it a lot easier for other people to get in the race. Right now, I believe from our perspective, we would like to see more people enter races and be able to run who can't raise that much money. But from their perspective, the people in office would rather limit the number of people who can run against them.
Well, when I was in college and I ran for student body president, we were told that we only had so much money that we could spend for our election. And, there were issues with that I can't even get into today. But what that did was it encouraged everybody to run, not just people who could afford it, but it was a very low limit on what you could spend. And I could argue that suppressed my First Amendment right to get my voice heard to as many people as possible. But I think that the advantage of that rule is that I'm not corrupted by people who are giving me money, and that everybody can run, or anybody can run. So why can't we do that on a national level? Why is that a bad idea? Or why is it a bad idea to publicly fund people's campaigns up to about $1 million or so and say, hey, that's what you got. You get so much airtime here, you get so much airtime here, and you have to win on that. If you can't win on that,
well, I mean, I don't know if it's practical. I don't.
It's done in other countries.
Well, I understand, but our country is pretty complex with its variety of media outlets and other sources. But again, to me, it just comes back to politicians really have no incentive to do it. Like the incumbents, they don't want extra people to run. They may say, and they, it doesn't really matter what side of the field. Publicly, they're going to say, "Oh, we love competition. We want more people to run." Privately, no. Nobody wants, whether you're running for the Clearwater Board of Directors or whether you're running for president, you want as few people as possible to run against you.
And you made a point earlier that people's number one goal is to stay there, and I agree it is, especially if you're a congressman in the House of Representatives.
Pretty sweet gig.
Then you only have 2 years, right? So you have to run every 2 years. So you're constantly campaigning. You never get out of campaign mode. And so all it is you're up there and you're campaigning from a state office, whether it be the Rayburn building or one right beside it. You're campaigning up there. So you're spending your time where you're not in Congress going back home to campaign in your district to get back up there for a job where you're making about, I think it's somewhere around $150,000 a year. And most of these guys, in the jobs that they made before they went to Congress, they were making millions of dollars a year. So why is it so important for them to stay in these jobs? I mean, are they there for the public service? Are they there for the money? Which was weird, because if you make $150,000 a year on top of the millions you already make in whatever industry you work in, why is it important that you be there? And these guys make a ton of money when they leave as lobbyists.
Yeah, well, partly it's what you make after the fact, but I think there's a power. There's an element that these people have. They want power. It's hard because when you're not one of those people, just as I'm not a serial killer, and it's hard to figure out why a serial killer is. I'm not somebody who desires to run for Congress. I'm not, and so it's a little harder to, what is that motivation? Mostly, I would say that motivation is probably, well, I honestly, I guess I think most people probably do get involved because they feel passionate.
I think that's where it starts.
About their cause.
I think a lot of times that's how it starts, and then it just the
lot
power
of work.
corrupts. The power corrupts.
Yeah, I mean,
but it's funny how
you
just. I'm sorry, I may cut you off, but it's funny. I just had to mention that it's funny that you just compared serial killers to politicians.
Well, two opposites, but or maybe not.
I don't know.
But what I was going to say is, you and I have both run campaigns, been a part of campaigns, and there's a lot of work, and the candidate doesn't necessarily get paid to do this, and so sometimes they may actually quit their job. They do all sorts of things to run. So until they actually get that job, it's not theirs. It's a lot easier if you have money. But
I mean, if you work a 9-to-5 job, you can't run a campaign. Okay,
No.
let's just say that.
Yeah.
So you have to work in a job where you're able to do these types of things, and most people don't work in these types of jobs. So we've really restricted what people can do and who can run. And I think that's a shame because there's a lot of average Joes out there that I'd like to see run. But a couple more last predictions I have before we get off here. We have overdone our time period here. I'm going to guess that President Trump's going to be pardoned by President Pence, so he's not going to do any jail time. He is going to face some indictments, but he's not going to do any jail time. I think that the only thing that Pence gets done is he is going to nominate a conservative judge who is going to be confirmed, because I think this is the year that one of the judges go down, and they're getting old. I think it's probably going to be somebody like Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who will retire or perish by the end of 2018. I hate to say that. I hope that no ill will towards anybody on the court, but I think some of these people are just getting really old, and I think that's going to give the court a very strong conservative majority, and I think that might be the legacy of Pence. During all this political chaos, the Middle East will flare back up, and nothing will be done about North Korea, because nothing can be done about North Korea, in my opinion. We talk about airstrikes and this and that, but it is a quagmire. I don't know what we do about this, and I'm not saying that this is Trump's fault, because this happened way before he came in, but I don't think he has made things any better by doing some of the things that he's done. I think there's going to be a terrorist attack on the U.S. soil this year. I think this is the year. I hope to God it doesn't.
No.
But I think that things are flaring up, and I think that
when you say terrorist, so you're talking something that's actually whether it's funded or some sort of.
Yeah, that's a good question.
It has to be actually something from the Middle East, where it's coordinated with people in the Middle East. Or
that's how most people. That's how most people define terrorism. I mean, honestly, I think that what happened in Las Vegas was an act of terror. I think that what happens in all these mass shootings are acts of terror. But excuse my language. I don't mean to make that sound like I just mean any act of terror. But what I'm talking about is a fanatical Muslim terrorist act. I hope not, but I feel like something like that's going to happen this year, and it's going to trigger and justify an attack probably in the Middle East on a country like Iran. I think this administration is going to justify by saying that the treaty with Iran is not working, and they want to keep the Ayatollah from destroying Israel, which is a strong bond that Trump is starting to build right now with Israel, which I have no problem with in some regards, but if it's done to justify more war in the Middle East, I wouldn't want to see that.
Well, I would have to say I don't obviously but I do agree. North Korea, probably nothing will happen. There's going to be more sanctions. They'll keep doing that. The only thing I would say, the only way something happens is if the North actually starts something. So I don't believe the U.S. will do any sort of first strike or anything like that. But if the North provokes by actually taking military action, I think that would be the start of it. I doubt that'll happen. He likes to talk. Kim Jong likes to talk a lot, but again, he still wants to survive, and I think he runs his mouth, but he also understands that going to war with the U.S. means he's dead. There is no, Saddam survived in a hole for a while. Osama bin Laden survived for years, but eventually we killed.
Yeah, I mean, this is a different type of war, though. So, we're talking about an enemy who has nuclear capability.
I'm just
possibly.
saying if there, but he knows that
he's not going to make it.
Yeah, and so I don't think that. But in the Middle East, we. I don't think anything is gonna. I think again we have a lot of saber rattling, a lot of anger that comes out of what's happened recently. I think things will die back down as they usually do. I'm not terribly worried about an outside attack on the U.S. But there's always the rogue person who they have their own views of things. They're not necessarily connected, and they might have. The only way they're connected is that they practice maybe the same religion. They have no necessarily connection to the Middle East, but they just feel and they've read whatever they're going and they because it's easy. I mean, someone with the pressure cooker, the Boston Marathon type bombing.
I think it's going to be something on a much bigger level, like we saw a long time ago. I hope not, man. Don't get me wrong. I hope not, but that's just I kind of see things going in that direction right now, and I hope I'm wrong. But hey, great interview today with
Thank you.
with Mr. Longoria. I can't wait to hear your next interview. I wish some of these people would talk to me, but apparently I'm like the George Costanza of this show. No one likes me.
Persona non grata.
Exactly. So I am wondering who this guy is sitting behind you in your studio. While I'm looking at your picture here, I see some skinny guy that's
That is my goal. So I'm gonna hopefully look like that. What's going on there? Oh, that's the mouse. Hold on there. We have a little battery issues, but yeah. Anyway, I actually
We're gonna
now that you
edit
bring it
that
up.
out.
I'm down to what the skeleton. I don't think we could edit him out. But
No, we're just gonna edit you out.
edit me out.
It'll take
All
out
right.
the whole thing.
All right. So, but anyway, I'm down 28 pounds now. So,
Congratulations, man. That's awesome.
That's I think 3 or so over the holidays. So that's not bad.
That
Or over
is
Christmas
impressive.
there.
Very good, very
So-
nicely done, sir. I think I'm down 14 pounds.
Nice.
So one of these shows, we're gonna have to talk about our diet and have our silly man conversations that we have about dieting. And one of these days, we'll do this. We'll do a show about
You
it.
know what I'd also like to, we don't, maybe we'll get a poll going up next week or tomorrow for the next week's show. But we talked about, or Evan talked about wearing Speedos, and you heard my question and just
Yeah,
mentioning
I was
that
surprised by
Chris
that.
he refuses to wear anything but Speedos.
I'm a
so
Speedo guy.
we want to know what how our listeners feel about that, whether they feel that it's appropriate to wear Speedos on Clearwater Beach, or whether beachgoers should be wearing board shorts or not. So feel free to chime in, message us on Facebook, comment whatever you want, but we'd like to know what you feel.
All right. Well, that about does it for our show. I'm going to finish this off here with some Bikini Bottom Boogie by Curtis Holbrook. We wish you guys a happy and safe New Year. If you have any problems, please give us a call. You can get a hold of me at 727-469-3012. If you have any legal problems concerning criminal matters or personal injury matters, you can also get a hold of Dan. And as we see here on the bottom of our screen, if you are a Facebook listener, you will see here that you can get a hold of Dan. He is right here. Law firm of Dan Perry, estate planning and elder law at perrylaw.com. He does a good job with elder law and estate matters. So give him a call if you'd like to as well. You can find him on his website, set up an appointment on there.
But I will be of no use if you get in trouble on New Year's. If you get in trouble, call Chris.
Call me on that one. I'd love to help you out, but be safe. Call an Uber, taxi, or what's the other one?
Lyft.
Okay, yeah. Call those guys. They'll come pick you up. If you have a smartphone, it's easy to do.
And don't forget, riding your bicycle drunk is still a DUI.
It is. It absolutely is. Oh, there we go. The Bikini Bottom Boogie. Hey, great having you all this week. We're going to come back live again on Facebook next week. It's Culturally Damaged with Dan and Chris.
Have a happy New Year.